Everyone, it's Madeline back again, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first film I saw, and maybe I'll set the scene a little bit. When I woke up on Saturday at like 8 a.m., which I don't normally do on Saturdays, I'm really not a morning person. It was drizzling rain. It was so gross out. My bed was so warm and so comfortable. But I had heard a lot of hype about Daughters. So I pulled my ass out of bed and I called a Lyft because I couldn't stomach transit that day. And by the time I got to the TIFFA light box, it was around 10 and the film started at 10:30. Yet the line was packed. It was so full already. And outside in the rain was a huge lineup of people who were waiting for rush tickets. So who were hoping that last minute some of the people who bought tickets wouldn't show up so they'd get the chance to see it. That's how the rush tickets work. There were a bunch of people who were willing to wait in the rain just for the chance to see Daughters. So that's how you know it's going to be a good one. And another way I knew it was going to be a good one, actually, is that at the opening night party of the Hot Docs Festival, which I was super pumped to be attending, even though I felt like such a tiny fish and such a big sea or such a big room of these people who are like stars to me. But anyways, I got the chance to meet Dawn Porter, who is the director of the festival's opening night documentary, Luther Never Too Much. I only got to speak to Dawn for a moment, but she was super nice and she recommended Daughters to me. So I knew that this was going to be a great documentary. It was really interesting actually to hear about how the two directors met. So Natalie Ray was sent a link to a TED Talk given by Angela Patton about the program that this film is about, which basically facilitates a father-daughter dance between young girls and their incarcerated fathers. So they go into the prison and they get to have an in-person dance with their fathers, and the fathers do a 10-week kind of, it's not exactly group therapy, but they have a 10-week program before where they talk a lot about fatherhood and just mentally prepare themselves to be seeing their daughters again. Anyways, when Natalie heard about this project, she reached out to Angela and she was like, there's a story here, and the two hit it off, and Daughters, became a project that they started working on. And it was a really beautiful film. It was, first of all, such a tear jerker. I was like genuinely crying for parts of it, and like I was looking around me and I was like, well, I'm not the only one. There was lots of Kleenexes, subtly dabbing eyes in the audience. It was shot on film and beautiful cinematography. And all the scenes with the daughters were lovely. The girls in this film are so charming and so full of life, and their stories about their relationships with their fathers were all really powerful. It was just a really beautiful and humanistic portrayal of these families. And I'd recommend it 1000%. It's worth the hype. I'd totally suggest that you do yourself a favor and go see it. The next documentary that I saw was The Sharp Edge of Peace. I was almost late to this one, actually. I had to cut out of the Q&A for Daughters a few minutes early, run from the TIFFA Lightbox to Scotiabank, and then luckily my roommate had saved me a seat. But anyways, The Sharp Edge of Peace, it was directed by Roya Sadat, and it's about the four women who joined the government of Afghanistan's negotiation team during the 2021 peace talks with the Taliban. And their primary goal was essentially to make sure that women's rights were prioritized in this negotiation, especially since American troops had recently pulled out of Afghanistan without negotiating any conditions to ensure the safety of Afghan women. In her introduction to the film, the director, Roya Sadat, actually explained that she's in exile for having created this film and that it was really, really dangerous to make, which you can totally sense it from honestly the first scene. It starts with a very abrupt and kind of scary incident, and then that sets the tone for how immediate of an issue and how at stake women's rights and women's safety were in Afghanistan at this time. The film spends a lot of time stressing how valiantly so many Afghan women have fought and continued to fight for their rights, and does a great job of dismantling the really harmful Western stereotype that often surrounds discussions of women in Afghanistan, which reduces them to symbols of oppression rather than seeing them as people with ambitions and interests who are very bravely fighting against their oppression. There has always been so much resistance, and this film really pays homage to that. One thing that I didn't love about this documentary was a couple of the kind of graphic design choices in the editing. I thought that some of them were a little bit distracted, or they used fonts that I just found really out of place, confusing, and it's like you don't want to be thinking about the font you're watching or like a graphic when you're watching a documentary. You just want to be focused on the subject. So I do wish that they took a little bit of like a more minimal approach to some of the editing, but I don't think that that was a major issue in the film. I don't think that that would be enough to deter me from watching it again or anything. So I would still recommend The Sharp Edge of Peace, and I still thought it was a fantastic documentary. The final doc I watched on Saturday was called Yintah, and I've actually been kind of dreading this one because seeing it in the theaters was the most powerful movie-going experience of my life, and I'm just having a hard time like thinking of the words to describe it, and I don't want to do service to this documentary by like mincing my words and messing it up. So I'm gonna do my best here. Yintah was directed by Jennifer Wickham, Brenda Mitchell, and Michael Toledano. And it basically takes you right onto the front lines of the Wet'suwet'en land defenders and their allies' resistance against the illegal construction of pipelines on Wet'suwet'en territory. And I spent a lot of time actually this semester reading up on the protests and mainly their media reception because I was doing a critical discourse analysis on it for class. But anyways, during this research, I came across a short documentary about the pipeline and the defense and the protests, and it was called Invasion, and it was made by Wet'suwet'en filmmakers who weren't credited by name. It was like their group, their activist group that was credited, but I do suspect that it was probably the same filmmakers as Yintah. I don't know for sure. So when I stepped into the lobby at TIFF, I immediately recognized from Invasion Frida Houston, who is the like I was about to shit myself because she is genuinely such an incredible, awe-inspiring, badass activist. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I'm like standing in the same lobby as her. Like I'm like breathing the same cinema air as her right now. That blew my mind. And I was so excited. And she spoke afterwards at the, it wasn't very much of a Q&A so much as all of the activists that were attending the film, who were in it, they had a lot of them come down, which was so exciting. And they basically kind of just took turns saying what they wanted to say because it was such a big group, and I liked that format. I thought that was really cool. Anyways, the room was just electric the whole time. Like the energy was insane. Everyone was so passionate about the documentary. Like, and I don't know how you couldn't be. Like the moments of triumph were like everyone was cheering and it was like euphoric. But then in the moments where you're watching like insanely aggravating and dehumanizing and violent bigotry and you're watching the RCMP brutalize these land defenders and just it's the Canadian government continuing its genocide against Indigenous people while pretending to care so much about quote unquote reconciliation, which is an absolute farce. But anyways, like the whole, they were cheering for the heroes and booing those who are oppressing them. And it was just, the energy was electric. And just nothing I can even say about the experience or film can come close to the impact that it had on me and that it created in that room. I think that Yintah should be like essential viewing. They should show it in schools because if you live on this land and you vote for who's in charge in the Canadian government, then this is a film that you need to see because there's still so much BS happening out there and Indigenous people are still being treated so, so poorly in Canada, and that just it makes me so happy that there's films like this that are taking a stand against it and giving you a look at what this kind of activism looks like. I thought it was brilliant. So check that one out. It will definitely be appearing in my top picks of the festival. I can tell you that right off the bat. It's a big standout for me. So yeah, I think that wraps up my review of Saturday's documentaries. Again, it was a very politically and emotionally charged kind of set of films, and I am really glad that I got to be there for the Q&As and get the director's perspectives on everything. It was super powerful, an amazing experience. Like again, Hot Docs is providing me such an education. Like I'm really, really happy that I get to be there, and I think that more people should recognize how great of an opportunity this festival is to hear so many really talented speakers talk and get all these different perspectives on so many different topics and social issues and political issues. And anyways, you guys already know that I think that you should check the festival out while it's still running. And if you miss these films, I'm really hoping that they'll be available on other platforms soon. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. But anyways, that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm really excited to talk about the next films I saw at Hot Docs. So yeah, until then, goodbye. See you later.